Have you ever wanted to start a podcast and just didn't know where to go to get your journey started? Well, look no further than Anchor Podcasting. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast, and it gives you everything you need for free in one spot, which you can use right from your computer or a mobile device if you need to record on the go. Creation tools allow you to edit and record your podcast to make it sound the best possible way for your audience and listeners. And they'll also distribute your podcast for you, so you don't have to go through the hassle of talking to different platforms in order to get your podcast through to everybody you wish. This includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. You can easily make money through Anchor Podcasting, and it doesn't require minimum listenership. So once you get started and set up, money can flow in from all directions. So if you're ready to get started, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.fm to get your ball rolling and start your podcast journey. You're listening to the Touch 'em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and on today's episode, we're breaking down the new and improved UFC 249 card, including all prelims and the main card alike, including three championship title fights, which include the Women's Featherweight Championship of the World, as the reigning, defending double champ Amanda the Lioness Nunes defends against top contender Felicia Spencer. Then, in the co-main event of the evening, for the Men's Bantamweight Championship of the World, we have the former reigning, defending, undisputed Bantamweight greatest of all time, Dominick, the Dominator Cruz, going up against the current double champ, or formerly double champ, but you know him as Triple C. That is Henry Triple C Cejudo. And then, in the main event of the evening, for the reigning, defending, interim lightweight champion of the world, it is the most title defenses for an interim championship, Tony El Cucuy Ferguson versus top contender Justin the Highlight Gaethje. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. Hey guys, how's everybody doing tonight? Like I said, we've got a lot to go over, including the entire card for UFC 249, or now known as UFC 250. And I kind of contradicted myself in that intro, but I had to go along with it. Amanda Nunes is not going to be fighting on May 9th anymore, so there is only two title fights now, and the Women's Featherweight Championship of the World will not be defended. She pulled out of the fight. She said she might be ready to go by June. I don't really know what a month's difference is going to make in this current time. I mean, you're either ready or you're not. I'm not, discrediting Amanda Nunes. She's one of the best, if not the best women's, mixed martial artists of all time. But I just think like a month in this current climate, it's not really going to help you too much. I mean, unless she's got an injury or something and she has something she needs to take care of, I get it. And I get it either way because, I don't think I would want to fight in the current times right now with the coronavirus going around. So, props to her. Hopefully she comes back and, better than ever. And, we'll see what happens when she comes back. But now, like I said, there's only two title fights now. The Men's Bantamweight Championship of the World between the current reigning, defending Triple C Henry Cejudo and the former Bantamweight champion, greatest of all time, Dominick the Dominator Cruz. And then the Ferguson and Gaethje fight. So I'm going to be doing that. We'll be breaking down this card from top to bottom, which is probably going to take two parts by itself, probably an hour on this card just because of how good the card is in general. And then we're going to go into the top 15 ranked UFC lightweight fighters. So the top 15 in the lightweight division. I'm going to give you my fights to make with that top 15 and a few guys outside of the top 15. Just that lightweight division is so stacked, and I figured what a better time to save fights that should happen when we're not really getting fights. And like I said, if you looked at my social media before I posted this episode, this is the first time we've broken down a fight card in a month. I mean, this is obviously, I did predictions for UFC 249 when it was going to happen on the 18th, which would have been 2 days ago. It obviously didn't go down like that. I saw something on Twitter that said UFC 250, 249, 250, UFC Lincoln, and UFC, what was it? There was one more UFC fight on May 16th. Oh, San Diego. Those were all canceled. But based on what I've seen being posted on social media lately, it looks like that's just like a announcement normally, and that UFC 250 is still a go, even though we don't know where the fight is taking place. So Yeah, I mean, I thought it was canceled, and I almost wasn't going to put out this episode. I was only going to do the top 15 and then the fights to make for them. But I think it's still a go for May 9th. So we're going to keep it rolling and keep this podcast going and get it out to everybody who really doesn't have anything to do right now because of the quarantine. So let's start it off. We can't be wasting no time because we got a lot of fights to cover. And first up on the prelims in the featherweight division, we've got Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell, who's 12-1 overall in mixed martial arts and 3-0 in the UFC, versus Charles Boston Strong Rosa, who's 12-3 overall and 3-3 in the UFC. You know, this is a good fight to open up the card. I know Bryce Mitchell. I've seen him fight before. Obviously, the second fighter in UFC history to pull off a twister submission. So if you haven't seen what a twister submission is, it's basically when you have your opponent in like a half guard position, but you're on their back or you're like close to their back. You take their one arm, which is going to be the arm closest to you. You put it behind your head. You reach underneath the neck with the arm that's closest to their arm that you put around their back or around your back. You reach around the other side, lock up either a bicep grab like a rear naked choke or grab your hands in like a gable grip position. You pull their head one way and you push with your hips and twist. And it's a very, very painful submission. We've worked on it in my training. But obviously, you know, when you're training that type of submission, that's so dangerous when it has to do with twisting the spine and everything like that. You have to be very careful. So hopefully I never get put in one. And I'm hoping I never have to put one in somebody in a twister either. So yeah, but for him to do that, the only other guy to do that was the Korean Zombie, Chan Sung Jung against Leonard Garcia. So that's a big feat for him. And yeah, he's really good. And when it comes to Charles Boston Strong Rosa, both of these guys are very good on the ground. Bryce Mitchell is very good on the top and very good on the bottom. He has a great guard, a really good guard game. He likes to throw up arm bars, throw up triangles. He'll catch you in really awkward positions. And one thing about him is when he hits the ground, he never stops moving. Whether it's in top position, he'll go from half guard to side control to the mount or transition, or if he's on the bottom, he'll always be throwing up arm bars, throwing up triangles, going for omoplatas. He kind of reminds me of a little bit less technical Charles Oliveira on the ground and a little bit like, I don't know on the feet because he's very awkward on the feet. He's a southpaw, but he will switch to orthodox every once in a while. He has a very strong overhand left, and he likes to throw. He has good inside and outside low kicks for the opponent that I think will work pretty good against Charles Rosa. Rosa's decent on the feet. But a lot of his wins and stuff come from ground control, and if he's able to catch you in a submission. I believe he caught Manny Bermudez in a submission not too long ago, and he was a very good decorated jiu-jitsu artist. He was able to catch him in an armbar. So it shows that he is dangerous off his back, but going up against a guy like Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell, you don't want to play on the ground at all. I mean, I know that Charles Rosa is good, but I don't think he's good enough to hang around with Bryce Mitchell on the floor. I think that he'll be throwing up submissions at every chance he gets. I think on the feet, neither of them are really technical in their striking, but if I have to give a slight advantage, I'd give it to Bryce Mitchell just because he does turn over his punches pretty well. He'll and what anybody means if you're like a novice fan, when you say turn over your punches, it's when instead of just going straight on and hitting with your knuckles, it's when you twist your hand right before you make the impact and you hit with the first two knuckles on your hand, which are the hardest part of that's the hardest part of your hand. And hitting with those two knuckles is going to make it harder for you to break your hand. And that's a big injury that happens in a lot of combat sports, boxing, the boxers fracture, and MMA alike. A lot of people break their hands. I mean, Uriah Faber fought for a world title and he broke both of his hands. He had to throw elbows and knees. I believe that was against Tenin Barao. But yeah, that's just the name of the game, and that's what happens. But I just think Bryce Mitchell is too dangerous for Charles Rosa on the floor, and I expect him to catch him in a submission. I think it'll be close for the first round and a half, and then I think Bryce Mitchell towards the second round will gain a lot of control on the ground and eventually lock up. I'll go with the triangle. I think he's going to lock up a triangle. I saw in one of his previous fights, he almost had his opponent in a perfect triangle. He turned the corner, got the angle, and was very close to getting the submission, but the opponent got out. And that's another thing with triangle chokes is, it's very hard. I mean, you can get a triangle from just sitting, having somebody in the guard, and, you take the arm, you put it across to the other side, and then you lock up the triangle and pull down on the head. But it's better to get the angle. So you grab the head, you lock the triangle up, but you turn your body to the side to the opposite side of where your legs are locked, where the figure four is, and you turn that way, and you keep turning and turning and turning, and it's almost like a twisting effect, and it makes the triangle a lot tighter and cuts off any additional space that would be in between the opponent's head and arm and your legs. But yeah, I got to go with Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell. Like I said, probably a second round submission by triangle choke. Up next in the welterweight division, it is the silent assassin, Vicente Luque, who holds a record of 17 wins, 7 losses, and 1 no contest overall in mixed martial arts, but a very impressive record of 10 wins and 2 losses inside of the UFC. And he's facing off against Nico the Hybrid Price, who holds a record of 14-3 overall in professional mixed martial arts, but a record of 6-3 in the UFC. This is a fight that I like to call, violence personified. It's just going to be a war. There's no way around it. That's just how the fight's going to play out. And when you look at a guy like Vicente Luque, he has very, very crisp hands. His kicks are very good as well. He has really good inside and outside low kicks, good kicks to the body, but his boxing is very, very clean, and his hands are very sharp. And he has a good ground game, good jiu-jitsu. He's got Darce chokes, anaconda chokes, and arm triangles, I believe, in his UFC career. So he can finish you off anywhere. He is a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He can finish you on the feet. He can finish you on the ground. When it comes to Nico the Hybrid Price, man, this guy's just a dog. I mean, he'll come at you from anywhere possible. He can finish the fights from anywhere. He could be losing the entire fight, and he will always find a way to win. That's one thing about Nico, is he'll find a way. Even he fought Jeff Neal. He lost the fight, but it was a war. He dropped him partially due to a headbutt, but he did hurt him and get on top and, almost finish the fight against Jeff Neal, but Jeff Neal came out on top. But he just has the ability to draw opponents into a brawl. And when you draw into a brawl with Nico Price, it's usually not a good idea, and you're usually going to come up on the short end of the stick. But when you're talking about a guy like Vicente Luque, he is one guy I've seen in the UFC who can get drawn into a brawl and still remain technical in the brawl. And I think that's a very important thing when you're going up against a guy like Nico Price, who could finish it from anywhere with up kicks from the floor. He can finish it with hammer fists from his back. He can catch you with a shot as you come in. He can catch you with knees up the middle. And I think that it's very important when a guy can get into a brawl but still remain technical. And you saw that with Vicente Luque against Brian Barberena. You saw it against Derek Krantz. You saw it against Bilal Muhammad. I mean, these guys were coming forward trying to put the pressure on him. And these guys have actually already fought before. That's one thing I didn't seem to mention was I believe Vicente Luque got the win via a second round submission in their first fight. So Vicente they've already fought before. So, they're going to have an idea of what the opponent is like in the cage. Obviously, you have an idea of what they're like when you watch their fights, but it's different when you're in the cage with them. And I just think when it comes down to it, Nico Price can finish it because, like I said, we've seen Vicente Luque get drawn into brawls before, and he could get caught with a knee or an overhand right or a high kick or something like that. But I think that Vicente Luque is too sharp to get caught into a lazy brawl. That's one thing about Nico Price is, yes, he'll get into brawls, but a lot of his strikes are kind of just winging punches and winging kicks. And against a guy who's sharp, crisp, and technical like Nico Price, that doesn't have to, or like Vicente Luque, I'm sorry, that doesn't have to use a lot of wind up in his shots and kind of can throw right from the hip and just turn the punches over. I think that that's going to be the difference. When you throw a punch and it's a wide shot, it's more telegraphed and it takes longer for the shot to get to the opponent and get to the target. When you throw a punch or a kick or a knee and it's crisp and it's clean and there's no fat in the movement, it gets there quicker and there's usually more power in the shot. So I have to give the advantage to Vicente Luque. I think the first round and a half, 2 rounds of this fight are going to be unbelievable. I think that these guys are going to go for broke. I expect both guys to get hurt, possibly both guys get dropped. But I think when it comes down to it, Vicente Luque is going to be able to land the cleaner shots in the brawl, and he's going to catch Nico Price slipping, drop him, and get a TKO. So I'm going to go with the silent assassin, Vicente Luque, to get the win via a third round TKO. All right, let's keep it moving. Keep it moving. Up next, a very, very good fight in the middleweight division. You have the number 10 ranked Uriah Primetime Hall, who holds a record of 16-9 in professional mixed martial arts, versus Ronaldo Jacare Souza, who was formerly a top-ranked middleweight, now ranked 14th in the light heavyweight division. He holds a record of 26 wins and 8 losses in professional mixed martial arts, and a record of 9 wins and 5 losses in the UFC. This is a fantastic fight. You know, it was supposed to take place previously at UFC 249. It didn't work out, obviously, because the fight card got canceled. But this is a fantastic fight. And I think a lot of people are counting out Uriah Primetime Hall here just because of the competition that Jacare has fought. He has wins over former middleweight champion Chris Weidman, wins over Gegard Mousasi. He has a win over Derek Brunson. He has a lot of very solid wins in his mixed martial arts career, but when you look at a guy like Uriah Primetime Hall, he's on a bit of a win streak. I believe he's got 2 wins back-to-back, one over Bevon Lewis. Then he lost previously to that, I believe, to Costa. Then before that, he got a third round, I believe it was a third round KO over Krzysztof Jotko with a beautifully timed overhand right. And then just most recently, he has a decision win over Antonio Carlos Jr., where he looked absolutely fantastic. But you look at the guys he's fought and the guys he's lost to. I mean, he's fought Robert the Reaper Whitaker and had a very solid performance at UFC 193. He's fought Paulo Costa. He's fought a lot of guys. He fought Chris Weidman previously to coming into the UFC. It's not talked about much. He was possibly going to fill in for Bisping at 199, to fight Rockhold before Bisping got the call. I think they might have were thinking about throwing Uriah Hall into that, spot. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. But if I remember right, I think they were going to maybe throw Uriah Hall in against Rockhold. But against a guy like Jacare Souza, he's on the downward spiral of his career. He's lost, I believe, 3 fights in a row, either 2 or 3 fights in a row. He lost to Jan Blachowicz. He lost to, let's see, actually, we can pull this up. Let's check it out. Hold on, guys. Ronaldo Souza's last fight. So he lost to Jan Blachowicz. He lost to Jack Hermanson. He beat Chris Weidman at UFC 230, which was on November 3rd, in a fantastic fight. He really down to the tooth and nail and ended up getting the KO in the 3rd round. And we'll talk about a reason why he got the KO in that fight, and it was mainly the body work, his shots to the body with his hooks and straight punches to the body and trying to rip up the liver was a big factor against Weidman, and I think that'll be a big factor against Uriah Hall. And then previously to that, he lost to Kelvin Gastelum, and then before that, he got a first-round KO over Derek Brunson. But when you look at Uriah Hall's last few fights, like I said, I mean, he's got some very solid wins, and he's fought some very tough competition. I mean, he has a win over Antonio Carlos Jr., he has a win over Bevon Lewis, and then prior to that, he lost to Paulo Costa and by second-round KO due to the body shots and then coming up top. But even against Paulo Costa, his jab his jab is fantastic. He has one of the best jabs in mixed martial arts. It's just it's just no windup, and it's so quick. It's just pop, 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 and he was blasting the face off of Paulo Costa with that jab. But when it comes down to the fight, it's really who has the advantage on the feet versus who has the advantage on the ground and in the clinch. On the ground, you obviously have to give the advantage to Ronaldo Jacare Souza. He is a phenomenal Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, one of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners in all of combat sports. And if he gets on top of you, it's usually over. But you look at, Uriah Hall, and one thing that people don't really give him credit for is his ability and awareness to defend submissions and positions on the ground. He might not be the best at defending takedowns, but once you get him to the ground, he's very good at staying calm, staying patient, and defending against submission attempts from some of the top guys, including Gegard Mousasi. In the first fight against Mousasi when he fought him in Japan and ended up getting the win in the 2nd round with that spinning back kick to the head into the flying knee and then the ground and pound, Mousasi was able to take him down at will, or take him down and try to control him on the ground, but Uriah Hall never stopped moving. He never stopped trying to get out of positions. And he used a Kimura grip to throw down Gegard Mousasi and then transitioned his hips over into an armbar attempt and almost could have got it. It was very close. And that's one thing. If you're going to do that to a guy like Mousasi, yes, you look at Ronaldo Jacare Souza, him and Mousasi are 1-1. Mousasi had a win via an up kick, I believe, in Dream. And then in the UFC, Ronaldo Jacare Souza got the win via guillotine choke. But, I think that Uriah's jiu-jitsu defense is good enough to avoid submission attempts from Jacare. And on the feet, I think there's different areas in the striking game where each of these guys are good at. At range, at kicking range, you have to give the advantage to Uriah Hall. At punching and kicking range, you give the advantage to Hall. Yes, Jacare has improved his striking. His punches are a lot cleaner. He can land good high kicks, good kicks to the body. But the best shot for Jacare is his body work. He has really, really made an effort to invest in the body work and invest. It's almost, when you hit to the body, you're making an investment for later in the fight. If you rip to the opponent's liver or you rip to the body over and over and over again, it's going to take the wind out of the opponent. And you look at Uriah Hall, his loss to Paulo Costa. One of the main reasons he lost that fight was because Costa was ripping to the body before he ended up going up top to get the finish. And it was a shot to the body that hurt him, and then boom, a shot up top. And I think that Jacare is going to look to implement that game plan against a guy like Uriah Hall. But at their current points in their career, I think Uriah Hall is at the best position he's ever been at in his career. And he trains at Fortis MMA with guys like Jeff Hands of Steel Neal and a few other really good guys that fight under the UFC brand. And I think that Uriah Hall is going to get the job done here. I think he has to keep it at kick and punch range. He cannot get into a clinch range and get into a brawl. Like I said, that's the area where Jacare has the biggest advantage on the ground and in a clinch range / where he can get into brawls and rip to the body, rip up top. But I think Uriah Hall's footwork, movement, and defensive awareness on the feet and his ability to stop takedowns, and even if he gets taken down, to avoid submission attempts with his good jiu-jitsu defense, I think is going to be enough for him to get the win over Jacare Souza. And I actually think he's going to get the win via a third round TKO. I believe in my previous predictions I said second round, but I think that it's going to be a close fight. I think Jacare is going to get pieced up on the feet a little bit, but I think that he's going to be able to come forward and hurt Uriah Hall. I think Hall will get taken down, but he will get back up to his feet and be able to get back to the striking range that he wants to be at. But I think that it's kind of going to play out to the way the first fight against Mousasi did, where he shot a takedown, kind of telegraphed the shot, and got hit with a kick. I don't know if it'll be a spinning back kick. I don't know if it'll be a flying knee or a roundhouse kick, but I think that Jacare is going to telegraph a takedown attempt and get caught with a knee or a kick coming in, get rocked, and get finished via TKO in the third round by Uriah Primetime Hall, and he will vault himself up to get a top 8, top 7, top 5 opposition in his next fight. Up next in the women's strawweight division, we have the number 7 ranked Carla Cookie Monster Esparza, who holds a record of 15 wins and 6 in MMA, and 6 losses in MMA, and 6-4 overall in the UFC, going up against the number 8 ranked Karate Hottie Michelle Waterson, who holds a record of 17 wins and 7 losses in MMA and 5-3 overall in the UFC. This is a good fight for the strawweight rankings. I'm not going to spend too much time on this fight because we have so many more fights to cover. But in all honesty, when it comes down to it, on the feet, it's Michelle Waterson's fight. On the ground and in the grappling, it's Cookie Monster Carla Esparza. And not due to the jiu-jitsu of Carla Esparza, but due to the wrestling control that she's able to establish against some of the top girls in the sport. She's gotten better on the feet, but you don't want to trade on the feet against a girl nicknamed the Karate Hottie. And Michelle Waterson's kicks, her kicking game is going to be a big factor against Carla Esparza. But one thing with that is you have to look out for the kicks getting caught and getting transitioned into a single or a double leg or maybe an outside or an inside trip. And then Carla Esparza is going to be able to get on top and control you in the top position, land ground and pound, and eventually look to set up a submission or just, pound you into oblivion. So I think that Michelle Waterson's going to have to be tricky with her kick setups, which, she's very good at. She can throw anything, side kicks, round kicks, tornado kicks, hook kicks, Anything you got, Michelle Waterson can throw. But I think she's going to have to set it up with the punches. If she goes out and just tries to throw empty kicks, they're going to get telegraphed and they're going to get, transitioned into a takedown and probably get caught by Carla Esparza. I do believe that in the clinched range, Michelle Waterson can get takedowns against Esparza, but I don't think she's going to want to put it in that position on the ground against a girl who's as decorated in the wrestling department as Carla Cookie Monster Esparza. But when it comes down to the fight, I expect it to be pretty close. I think Carla will get a few takedowns, but I think Michelle Waterson will be able to get back up to the feet. Or if she does get taken down, it'll be close to the end of the round. So Cookie Monster won't be able to get off as much striking and as much damage. And I think on the feet, Michelle Waterson's going to kind of just fight like a technical karate, kickboxing, point fighting type of fight. I think she's going to stay on the outside, throw a lot of side kicks, throw some jabs into roundhouse kicks, and just stick and move. And I think that that's going to be a big factor, and it's going to lead to the win for the number 8 ranked Michelle, the karate hottie, Michelle Waterson. So yeah, I think she's going to win via decision. I think, like I said, she's going to poke and prod, keep Carla Esparza at a distance, and get off enough damage to win the fight on the cards. Up next in the heavyweight division, we have the number 12 ranked BOA constrictor, Alexei Oleinik, who holds a very impressive record of 58 wins, 13 losses, and 1 no contest in professional mixed martial arts, with a record of 7 wins and 4 losses overall in the UFC. And he's going up against Fabricio Vai-Cavallo Verdum, who's 23 wins, 8 losses, and 1 no contest in MMA, and 9-3 overall in the UFC. However, Fabricio Verdum has not fought since early 2018. So it's been almost 2 years, or a little over 2 years, forgive me if I'm wrong, since we've seen Fabricio Verdum, and it was due to a USADA drug test violation. The BOA constrictor, Alexei Oleinik, like I said, he's had a lot more fights in his career, but in the UFC, he's 7-4. And both of these guys' chins are suspect. We saw Verdum get knocked out cold by Stipe, which isn't anything to be ashamed of. We saw him get knocked out by Alexander Volkov as well. He caught him with an uppercut, a couple uppercuts, and then jumped on him on the ground. And Verdum has been knocked out. And the BOA constrictor, Alexei Oleinik, he's not really that good on the feet. He's going to look to take you down. He's going to look to control you on the ground, and he's going to look to get a submission. And against a guy like Fabricio Verdum, who's one of the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners in all of combat sports and a very, very decorated Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. He submitted the last emperor, Fedor Emelianenko, handing him his first loss, and I believe might have been almost close to a decade or something like that before he got that loss to Verdum via the triangle choke. But when it comes down to the fight, I think on the feet, it's obviously an advantage for Fabricio Verdum. I think that he's good enough on the feet with striking, obviously working with Professor Rafael Cordero out of King's MMA. His Muay Thai has gotten pretty good. He's got really good knees, good work from the clinch, and good strikes from range, including kicks to the body and good punches overall. His striking game has really evolved once he got into the UFC. That's a place where he's going to have a big advantage against a guy like Alexei Oleinik. On the ground, I think I got to give the advantage to Alexei Oleinik. Not to say Verdum isn't good on the ground and he can't lock up a submission. Either one of these guys can lock up a submission. And I really, when it comes down to it, at first I picked Verdum. I just thought he was going to come back, look pretty good, and get back into his groove and, outstrike him on the feet, drop him, and hurt him and get a TKO. But when I thought about it, Verdum's been gone for 2 years. And if you listen to a guy like Dominick Cruz, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, he says ring rust doesn't exist. But in the heavyweight division, I believe it definitely does. And, his chin's been a little suspect. I think Alexei Oleinik's chin is a little worse. But I believe that he's going to be able to submit Fabricio Verdum just because of how long it's been since he's competed. In the heavyweight division, like I said, I think that ring rust means a lot. And him being gone for over 2 years and how much the heavyweight division has changed since he's been gone, I think that it's a big problem for Verdum. And I think he's going to get submitted. I think he's going to get caught in the Ezekiel choke. I think that Verdum obviously has good enough defense to avoid a lot of positions on the ground or possibly, submit Alexei Oleinik. But I just think he's going to get caught in a weird position and Alexei Oleinik's going to get that grip on him, squeeze, and get the submission. And he might choke him unconscious. And I'm probably going to, shoot myself in the foot with this pick. But I'm going with the number 12 ranked BOA constrictor, Alexei Oleinik, to submit Fabricio Verdum in the third round. I think Verdum's going to get tired, and I think Olynyk's going to pick up the pace and get it going. But that should be a good fight, and I'm excited to see what Verdum looks like in his return. All right, we're going to move to the second part of this episode, and we're going to continue with the UFC 250 predictions. So I will see you on the next part, guys. All right, peace. All right, guys, we're back with the second part of the UFC 250 Gaethje versus Ferguson predictions, and we're gonna pick it up right where we left off. And the next fight on the card is keeping it in the heavyweight division between undefeated Yorgan De Castro, who's 6-0 in MMA and 1-0 overall in the UFC, going up against the Prince of War, Greg Hardy, who's 5-2 in MMA and 2-2 overall in the UFC. This fight really, I broke it down before, but it's going to be a close fight either way, because you look at a guy like Yorgan De Castro, and yes, he has a lot of power, and yes, he's pretty technical with his shots, and if he connects on your chin, he can knock you out, and he can knock you out moving backwards. That's one thing that's really difficult for people to do, is to knock somebody out as they're moving backwards. A few people who are really good at it include Tony Ferguson. There's a few other guys. Jorginho Rosenstrike is pretty good at catching people moving backwards. Dominick Cruz is good at catching people moving backwards, not really knocking them out, but catching them as they move in. And the list goes on and on. But against a guy like Greg Hardy, who has fought Alexander Volkov, yes, he lost the fight, but he looked good in the 3-round performance against a top contender in the heavyweight division in Alexander Volkov. And I've said it multiple times before, I think that the Alexander Volkov fight is going to be used to level up Greg Hardy in his overall career. I think that it really leveled him up in terms of how good he is and how good he can be. I think that fight really opened up a lot of people's eyes, where maybe he's not going to be the champion. Maybe he's not going to be the number 2 or number 3 in the world, but he might get to number 6, number 7 in that heavyweight division, depending on how much progress he can make from training camp to training camp. And I really think that Greg Hardy's going to show up in this fight. And I think he's going to put Yorgan De Castro away. I think the first round it'll be actually a first round finish. Either way, if Yorgan De Castro knocks him out, or if Greg Hardy finishes Yorgan De Castro, it's going to be in the first round. I think that Greg Hardy at first will kind of try to play it slow and pick his shots. But I think that Yorgan De Castro, even though he does have a lot of power and he's decently technical, he does tend to wing his shots a little bit. And I think Greg Hardy will be able to counter him as he tries to brawl or tries to throw a long combination but wing his punches. I think Greg Hardy will catch him on the chin, drop him, and then finish him off with a TKO. So I'm going to go with the Prince of War, Greg Hardy, to get the victory via first round TKO. Up next in the welterweight division, a fight that was recently added to the card, and I can't believe it's on the prelims. The number 6 ranked lightweight, Donald Cowboy Cerrone, who holds a record of 36 wins and 14 losses in professional mixed martial arts, but is 23 wins and 11 losses in the UFC, going up against the number 15 ranked welterweight, Anthony Showtime Pettis, who's 22-10 in professional mixed martial arts with a record of 9 wins and 8 losses in the UFC. I am very, very intrigued by this fight and very excited to see it at welterweight. I think that it's very different. It's going to be a very different fight at 170 than it would be at 155. I think that Cowboy fights very well at 170. He looks good at 55 too. Obviously, he's coming off 3 back-to-back knockout losses, but those losses were to Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, and Conor McGregor. Those are the top 3-4 guys in the lightweight division. And then you got to put Poirier in there as well. And then Khabib, obviously. But, those losses, even though, yes, Cowboy's probably at the downside of his career, coming off 3 losses in a row, he's still one of the best in the world. He still can come in any day and beat some of the top guys in this sport. It really depends what Cowboy shows up. And when it comes to Anthony Showtime Pettis, he's been really hot and cold throughout his entire career. I mean, you look at his UFC record, and he's 9-8 in the UFC. But some of those losses have come to, Edson Barbosa, Rafael Dos Anjos, Nate Diaz. He never fought Khabib, Who else has he lost to in the UFC? He beat, but he's got some good wins as well. I mean, he has a win over Donald Cowboy Cerrone in the first round via a vicious left kick to the liver that stopped Cowboy in his tracks. He has a win over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson by knockout, the only guy to knock out Wonderboy. He's got wins over guys he looked good against Tony Ferguson. Yes, he lost the fight, but he did drop him in their fight. And when it comes down to the fight and who I think is going to win, I think in the grappling, I'm really intrigued to see what the jiu-jitsu and wrestling exchanges look like between Cowboy and Pettis on the ground, because both guys are very decorated jiu-jitsu artists. I would give a slight advantage to Donald Cowboy Cerrone. I think he has some of the most slick jiu-jitsu in all of mixed martial arts, and I think if he catches anybody in a triangle or gets their back, he can submit them. Now, Anthony Pettis is very good, and he's very scrambly on the ground, and he can submit guys as well. He has a very solid guillotine, a really, really good triangle, good arm bars. He can lock up submissions from anywhere, and he's good at scrambling and transitioning on the ground. I think that we're going to see a lot of transitions between these two in the wrestling and jiu-jitsu exchanges, and I don't know who's going to end up on top or who's going to end up in control. I really have no idea. On the feet, in terms of variety and sharpness, I give the advantage to Anthony Showtime Pettis, but in terms of just being a gamer, obviously Pettis is really good as well, and he doesn't really he doesn't make any fight look easy for the opponent. Obviously, he lost previously to Diego Ferreira via first round submission, I believe, so he didn't look too good in that fight, but I do believe that he's going to come in reinvigorated at 170, and even though Cerrone looks great at 170, and he's fought, he's fought Robbie Lawler, he's fought Matt Brown, he's fought, like I said, he's fought Patrick Cote, he's fought a lot of really good guys at 170. But when it comes down to it, I think I really don't know, because at first I was thinking Cerrone, then I switched and said Pettis because I just thought he was a little bit too he had a little bit too much variety for Cowboy on the feet, and I still believe that those body shots are going to be a problem for Cerrone. I think he's had problems with body shots throughout his entire career. And when it really comes down to it, I think that the knockout losses, 3 KOs in a row, his last fight was in January. It's only going to be May when he comes back. That's a long break for Cowboy because, we're used to seeing him fight maybe every 3 weeks, every month and a half. So 3 months off is a long time for Cerrone. But I think that those knockout losses in a row just really have deteriorated Cowboy. And I think Pettis has taken a lot of damage, but he hasn't taken as much damage as Cerrone. And I think Pettis will come in. He'll look good. I think he'll stick and move. And I think he's going to catch Cowboy. And I think he's going to finish him. I think he hurts him to the body. I think he goes down low with leg kicks, kind of like what he tried to do against Tony Ferguson. And then he moves up to the body and eventually just rips up the body of Cerrone, hurts him to the body, and then goes in and gets a TKO finish in the second round. I'm going to go a second round TKO win for Anthony Showtime Pettis, but it should be an amazing fight. I like both of these guys. These are two of my favorite fighters to watch. I'm rooting for Cowboy a little bit. I have to because I've always been a huge fan of Cowboy, but that's not to say I don't like Pettis either, but I just see Pettis getting the job done here. Up next, we move to the main card. Those are all on the prelims. Can you guys believe it? But let's move to the main card. And up first, it is a banger of a fight in the featherweight division. We have the number 7 ranked Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens, who holds a record of 28-17 in professional mixed martial arts and 16 wins and 16 losses in the UFC. He basically grew up for his entire fight career in the UFC. And then versus the number 8 ranked Boston finisher Kelvin Kattar, who holds a record of 20 wins and 4 losses in professional mixed martial arts with a record of 4 wins and 2 losses in the UFC. This is going to be a phenomenal fight. This is going to be a firefight. These guys are going to be throwing bombs at your moms, and these guys are going to be looking for the finish. When it comes down to breaking it down, let's start out with Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens. He's not the most technical guy in the world, but there are areas in which Jeremy Stevens can put the hurt on you. And one area is that he always looks for the finish. Anytime in a fight, Jeremy Stevens is looking to knock your head off with an overhand right or catch you with a left hook or throw a flying knee or a high kick. I mean, he's got some very solid knockouts throughout his career. I mean, he's got a flying knee knockout over Who did he get that knockout over at UFC 189? Dennis Bermudez, where it was he was backing up towards the fence and he landed like a fadeaway flying knee. He's got a vicious left hook knockout over Josh Emmett, which looks really good considering how good Josh Emmett has looked in his last few fights. I mean, he has that knockout win over Michael the Menace Johnson, where he was probably going to lose the fight on the cards. And then he had that vicious knockout win over Mirsad Bektic, which looks very good for him as well. So he's got a knockout win over him. He's got a knockout win over Doo-Ho Choi. Caught him with an overhand right as he was circling away, jumped on him and got the finish. The one fight you got to look at, and let me get into Calvin Kattar really quick before I break down the intangibles. Calvin Kattar, hey, I've been singing this guy's praises for a very, very long time. This guy is so sharp, and he probably has some of, if not the best, boxing technique in all of professional mixed martial arts. He's up there with some of the best boxers in the sport. Some guys with the best hands. I mean, a very straight right hand, a vicious 1-2, likes to switch it from the jab to the lead hook, which directs the opponent into the straight right hand. Very good at maintaining range by keeping his hands out and controlling the opponent's hands and then setting up either that hook cross or the 1-2. Like you saw against Ricardo Lamas at UFC 238, he likes to throw that hook up top and then go to the body with the cross. And by doing that, it gets the opponent to think you're going to go low, and then you set it up 3-2, go to the head, and he finished off Lamas beautifully. One area for each guy that I think is going to play a big factor. What are their weaknesses? And when it comes to Calvin Kattar, I think that his weaknesses overall are in the leg kick area. I think Jeremy Stephens has a weakness for leg kicks as well, but I think that we're gonna see Jeremy Stephens look to implement the calf kick against Calvin Kattar. He did very well with it against Gilbert Melendez and basically chewed up his lead leg throughout the entire fight. So he's got it, and he's thinking about using it in the fight. I would be very surprised if he didn't try to set up low kicks right from the get-go. Kelvin has gotten better at defending kicks, but the main defense he likes to use is he'll pull back that lead leg and kind of replace his rear foot with it, and then he'll go back and step forward back into range to go back to striking. The pulling back low kick counter, pulling back your lead leg, works with some guys, but against guys who are very good with low kicks and who can set it up with the hands, it's kind of hard to pull away from the low kicks unless you have a really big reach advantage and you can just maintain control the distance. I think that Calvin Kattar does have good enough reach to try and avoid a lot of the low kicks that Jeremy Stephens might try to employ. I think that trying to control the lead hand with Kelvin's lead hand is going to be a big factor for him. I think the fakes and feints and trying to work to the body will be a big factor as well. Even though I don't see Kelvin trying to throw a lot of kicks, I think it's going to be mainly a boxing approach from him because that's what he likes to do. And I think Jeremy Stephens will try to, like I said, mix it up with kicks. I don't think we'll see any grappling. I think this will be a stand-up affair. When it comes to like the different ranges, in clinch range, I would give the advantage to Stephens just because he can get into the ability to get into a brawl. He will go in for broke. With strikes to the head in the clinch, I give the advantage to Stephens. With strikes to the body, I think Kelvin can work the body very well and try to rip to the body and then come up with an uppercut. I think that an uppercut would be very beneficial against a guy like Stephens who might just try to come in, guns blazes, doesn't move his head too much, but he'll kind of just try to come in and wing his shots and try to catch you with that left hook or that overhand right, or he'll go overhand right, load up his left hip. As you circle away from the right hand, he'll catch you with the left hook. But I just think when it comes down to the fight, it's going to be close, and either guy can finish. This is a fight where if you look away for a brief second, either guy could get knocked out cold. But I think that the distance control, the distance management, and the technical ability of Calvin Kattar when it comes to his hands, like Joe Rogan said, when it comes to the hands with Kattar, there's not a lot of people who can beat him. And he looked good against Zabit. Like I said, we were going to talk about that. He looked like he had a way better performance against Zabit Magomedsharipov than did Jeremy Stephens. Stephens did decent and was able to land some good shots, but he did get hit a lot by the strikes of Zabit and kind of got hit with some flashy stuff. Calvin Kattar was able to avoid a lot of the flashy strikes of Zabit in that fight. And I think that's what it comes down to. That's the one common opponent that they have. And I think that Kelvin did a better job because he's so technical and so aware and so patient. That's another area we got to talk about in the fight really quick before I give you my final prediction, is the fact that Jeremy Stephens, it tends to not be as patient in his fights. He'll kind of just wing forward and look for the shots. And I think Kelvin Kattar can keep him at range with that jab. He has one of the best jabs in the sport as well. Very good boxing, like I said. But I think that he's patient enough to stay on the outside and pick Jeremy Stephens apart and catch him as he tries to come in and bum rush him. That's a dangerous game to play if you try to get into a brawl with Stephens. I think that Kattar's too smart for that. And I expect Kelvin Kattar to actually get the finish over Jeremy Stephens. I'm going to go with we'll go with a third round TKO. I think the first round, both guys will just kind of feel each other out. I think the second round, it'll get a little bit heated, and I think Stephens will kind of try to push forward a little bit more, and I think that's when Kattar's going to make the reads and pick up on the patterns of Stephens and then catch him with that right hand or the left hook and drop him and get a TKO. So I'm going to go with the Boston finisher, Kelvin Kattar, to get the win via a third round TKO over Jeremy Stephens and vault himself up to that top 5 contender status in the featherweight division. Up next in the heavyweight division, we have a fight that is power and raw KO power personified. In the heavyweight division, we have the number 2 ranked Francis the Predator Ngannou, who holds a record of 14 wins and 3 losses in MMA and 9-2 overall in professional mixed martial, 9-2 overall in the UFC, going up against the number 6 ranked Biggie Boy Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who is undefeated in professional mixed martial arts at 10 wins and no losses and 4-0 overall in the UFC. This fight is extremely hard to predict. It's so hard because both guys have amazing knockout power. If they touch your chin, they can put you to sleep. And I don't care if it's Francis Ngannou who gets touched on the chin. I don't care if it's Biggie Boy who gets touched on the chin. Either guy gets hit on the chin clean, they can get KO'd. But when it comes down to breaking down the fight, I think that the more technical out of the two is Jairzinho Biggie Boy Rozenstruik. I think Biggie Boy is more technical and doesn't put as much power into every shot that he throws. And what I mean by that is when you see Francis, he doesn't really throw any pity pat strikes. He doesn't throw a lot of strikes to set up power shots. Everything from Francis is power. And even though he doesn't have to wind up so much on every strike, and if he connects on your chin, he can put you to bed, I think that the ability of Jairzinho to throw some pity patter strikes, including kicks to the body, kicks to the legs, kicks up top, and then set up with, 5, 6, 7, 8 punch combinations, I think that's going to fluster a guy like Francis. I think that it might lead him to perform like he did against Derek Lewis and not be able to pull the trigger because of the volume of a guy like Biggie Boy Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I think he can touch, and then pop, pop, pop. Touch, pop, pop, pop. And I think with Francis, everything that he throws is just boom, 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 boom. He might set you up with a jab here and there to throw the overhand right, but a lot of his stuff isn't set up. He does have good footwork and good ability to get outside lead outside foot positioning. And by getting that lead outside foot, he can set up the overhand right, or he can get on an angle to set up the left hook and catch the opponent on the chin. But I think that really when it comes down to it, I think the volume of Biggie Boy, and you look at some equal opponents between the two, obviously Alistair Overeem, Francis Ngannou basically killed Alistair Overeem with that left hook / uppercut in that combination at UFC 218, and it looked like he killed him. And then Biggie Boy was having a lot of trouble and kind of got out grappled by Alistair Overeem, but then was able to come back at the end of the 5th round and set up a beautiful overhand left. I believe it was I think he got the outside foot and loaded up that right hand, and then boom, caught him on the chin, dropped him, and the ref stopped it. But like I said, I think the volume and the kicking game of Jairzinho Rozenstruik is going to cause Francis to not bite to not open up, is what I'm saying. Not open up, and he's going to freeze a little bit. And I think that he's going to try to throw a bomb on Jairzinho, and I think Jairzinho is going to catch him. And I think this is the first time we're going to see Francis Ngannou get finished in the UFC. And I know a lot of people are counting out Biggie Boy in this fight, but I don't see that. I think Biggie Boy, I think the volume, the pity pat strikes to set up the power is going to cause Francis to freeze up and have to cover up and think too much for him to be able to throw his shots with efficient power and efficient setup. So I expect it to be a great fight. I think these guys are going to come out and look for the finish, but I think that, like I said, I think Biggie Boy's volume and overall he has more weapons when it comes to the kicking game and overall, just like I said, multiple strike combinations. So I'm going to go with Biggie Boy, Jairzinho Rozenstruik to get the finish via third round TKO. I think he's going to tire Francis out with the pity pat strikes and the volume that he throws. I think it's going to set up a shot. Francis is going to try to counter, and then Jairzinho is going to counter the counter with either that overhand right or that left hook and drop him and get the finish. So I'm going with Biggie Boy, Jairzinho Rozenstruik to get the win via a third round TKO over Francis the Predator Ngannou. Now we move to the title fights, the thing that everybody is waiting to hear about. And first up in the bantamweight division, and before I get into it, like I said, there was supposed to be a featherweight championship fight between Amanda Nunes and Felicia Spencer, but that is no longer happening. Francis Ngannou, not Francis Ngannou. What's his name? But what's his name? Oh my God, I'm really going for broke here. I think. I'm having a brain fart. I think Felicia Spencer, obviously, and Amanda Nunes aren't fighting. It's a tough blow to the card, but now we only got 2 title fights, but it's the 2 best title fights on the card anyway, so let's keep it going. First up, in the bantamweight division for the Bantamweight Championship of the World, we have the reigning defending Bantamweight Champion Henry Triple C Cejudo, who holds a record of 15-2 in professional mixed martial arts and 9-2 overall in the UFC, going up against the former greatest of all time bantamweight contender and the former reigning defending bantamweight champion Dominick the Dominator Cruz, who holds a record of 22 wins and 2 losses in professional mixed martial arts and 5-1 in the UFC. Now, first up, one thing we have to cover is activity. Henry Cejudo has been the much more active competitor. He's fought a lot more in the last few years than Dominick Cruz has. The last fight Dominick Cruz had was at UFC 207, where he lost his title to Cody Garbrandt in a phenomenal performance by Cody. And that was on December 30th, 2016. It's now, going to be May of 2020. That's almost 4 years since Dominick Cruz has last competed. That's a long time to be away. And I know that Dominick says, ring rust doesn't exist. And he kind of proved it after being gone for, I believe it was 2 years leading up to the Takeya Mizugaki fight, and then a year leading up to his title-winning victory over TJ Dillashaw, where he just looked phenomenal. It was a close fight, but I definitely had Dominick Cruz winning that fight against Dillashaw 3-2. When it comes to breaking the fight down, obviously in the speed, I don't know who has the speed advantage. And it's tough. You got to break down speed in different areas when it comes to this fight. In terms of striking speed, I have to give the advantage to Henry Cejudo. I think he has good ability to throw combinations. I think his kicks and his punches come out at almost lightning speed. But he only moves in singular footwork patterns. Henry Cejudo doesn't really cut off the cage. He doesn't really use a lot of angles to set up his shots. He's kind of just uses that karate stance to go in and out, in and out, in and out, and then commits with that right hand or commits with a left hook or goes with a high kick. He did kind of connect on a sort of an angle when he knocked out Dillashaw in their fight. He threw like a 1-2 and he caught him with that overhand right as Dillashaw was trying to slip. Now, against a guy who slips and moves his head and moves his feet as much as Dominick Cruz, that could be an issue for Dominick, because he might be able to catch him as he's trying to slip out of the way of a shot. Because when you slip out of the way in terms of Dominick Cruz, your hands are always down, so it's easier to get caught with shots. But when it comes down to the fight, you got to look at the height for each guy. Dominick Cruz is 5'8", okay? Henry Cejudo is 5'4". So Dominick Cruz is going to have a 4-inch height advantage. That's going to play a big factor in the fight. I don't care what any of you guys say. You can say that I'm crazy for thinking Dominick Cruz might win this fight, but you got to look at it in terms of from a technical standpoint. And Henry has never fought a guy who's moved in so many different angles and so many different footwork patterns as Dominick Cruz. He's never fought a guy who bumps in with his left hip just to get you to come in, and then he switches to southpaw quickly and then moves back to orthodox. He's never fought a guy who might come in and throw that right hand as you're backing him up against the fence to cut the angle off to your weak side and get back to the center. He's never fought a guy who constantly moves and fakes and feints and uses that jab to circle on you and then set up the right hand and then switch back to southpaw with that check right hook. And the footwork and the setup of Dominick Cruz, he has the best footwork in MMA, and nobody comes close. You could say Dillashaw, but it's not. It's not even close. Dillashaw kind of got outclassed by Dominick Cruz when it came to footwork and movement. And I think the height advantage for Dominick Cruz of 4 inches is a big deal in terms of footwork and being able to move in and out and move and stick on the outside. For wrestling, I think that the height advantage is a little bit of a disadvantage for Dominick Cruz, because one thing with height is if the guy's a very good wrestler, Cejudo's an Olympian, and he likes to go in for takedowns and, shoot a single leg, shoot a double leg. And he's going to be lower to the ground and closer to the hips of Dominick Cruz because he's shorter. So it might allow him to get a quicker entry on takedowns. But one thing about Henry is he likes to get his takedowns from the over-under clinch and then go for that inside trip. Against a guy who's 4 inches taller, that inside trip takedown isn't going to work as well because Dominick Cruz has, such a big height advantage over Henry Cejudo. So even if he goes for that outside trip, Dominick might be able to just get his hips back and stay on the feet, and then have Henry Cejudo be out of position. And that's a big deal. And I'm going to go with Dominick Cruz here to regain his UFC Bantamweight Championship. I think a lot of guys count out Dominick Cruz for how long he's been away, and that could play a big factor. We don't know what Cruz is going to look like, but I think he'll be ready. I think that he will constantly cut angles on Henry Cejudo that Cejudo is not used to. I think he will get taken down, but I also think Dominick is going to take down Henry, and that's a big thing for me to say considering Henry is an Olympian. But I think the way Dominick Cruz sets up his strikes, and he'll slip to your weak side and then go for a knee tap takedown like he did against Uriah Faber, or he'll wait for you to come forward, and then he'll fake and then go for a takedown. I think that's going to play a big factor in the fight, and I think it's going to leave Henry Cejudo flustered. And I think Dominick Cruz, it's going to be a close fight for the first few rounds, but I think Dominick's going to pick up on the patterns of Henry and his singular just forward and back movement and a little bit of side-to-side movement, and he's going to set up his game plan. He's going to stick and move, and he's going to become the new bantamweight champion of the world. And I think he's going to defeat Henry Cejudo via unanimous decision. And if I'm going to go with the scorecards, I'm going to go 49-46, actually. I'm going to go 4 rounds. No, you know what? I'll give Henry the benefit of the doubt. We'll go 48-47, unanimous decision for Dominick the Dominator Cruz. And finally, the main event of the evening for the Interim Lightweight Championship of the world. You have the number 1 ranked Tony El Cucuy Ferguson, the reigning defending Interim Lightweight Champion, as you could say, who holds a record of 25 wins and 3 losses in MMA and 15-1 overall in the UFC, going up against the number 4 ranked Justin, the Highlight Gaethje, who holds a record of 21 wins and 2 losses, 4-2 overall in the UFC. Some intangibles in this fight that I think are going to play a big factor. The reach, it's a 6.5-inch reach advantage for Tony Ferguson. So he's going to be able to keep the fight at range and try to stick and move and not allow Justin Gaethje to close the distance. And they both have equal height of 5 feet 9 inches. So, they're both the same height, but Ferguson's got a 6.5-inch reach advantage. That could be a big problem for a guy like Justin Gaethje. And we're actually going to move to the final part of this podcast, and we'll talk about Ferguson and Gaethje because we're going to run out of time on this part. All right, guys, catch you on the next part. Have you ever wanted to start a podcast and just didn't know where to go to get your journey started? Well, look no further than Anchor Podcasting. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast, and it gives you everything you need for free in one spot, which you can use right from your computer or a mobile device if you need to record on the go. Creation tools allow you to edit and record your podcast and make it sound the best possible way for your audience and listeners. And they'll also distribute your podcast for you, so you don't have to go through the hassle of talking to different platforms in order to get your podcast through to everybody you wish. This includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many more.
You can easily make money through Anchor podcasting, and it doesn't require minimum listenership. So once you get started and set up, money can flow in from all directions. So if you're ready to get started, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.fm to get your ball rolling and start your podcast journey.
All right, guys, we're back with the final part of episode 88. And what a better way to end it off than by talking about the main event of UFC 250 for the Interim Lightweight Championship of the world, with a fight between the number one ranked Tony El Cucuy Ferguson, who holds a record of 25 wins, 3 losses in MMA, 15-1 overall in the UFC, versus the number 4 ranked Justin the Highlight Gaethje, who holds a record of 21 wins and 2 losses in mixed martial arts and 4-2 overall in the UFC. I broke down the stats previously on the last part of this podcast, but we were running out of time, so I figured let me just dedicate a part of this episode to this fight alone, because it's a huge fight and there's a lot of stuff to break down that can be a big factor in a fight between guys like Ferguson and Gaethje. And first off, the reach. 70 inches for Justin Gaethje, 76.5 inches for Tony El Cucuy Ferguson. This is a big deal. And one of the main reasons is Tony's going to be able to hit Gaethje at a range that Gaethje's not going to be able to hit Tony at. That's a 6.5-inch reach advantage. That's a lot. That is a lot of range to cover. And against a guy who's already so long in how he fights like Tony, that could be a big problem with teeps to the body, ripping that teep to the gut under the breadbasket, taking the wind out of him. He likes to throw his punches. He practices on a Wing Chun dummy, so his punches, even though his hands aren't ever really up to block a shot, he kind of just throws with his chin up in the air, but he's got such a long, lanky frame that his kicks and punches can come and can land at this range, and he could still get out of the way because of how big his reach advantage is. This could be a problem for Gaethje, because if Gaethje isn't able to get in close and rough up Tony Ferguson, Ferguson can pick him apart from range. But that's never really seemed to be a problem for a guy like Gaethje, and I'll tell you why. The leg kicks. The leg kicks of Justin Gaethje are going to be a big, big factor against a guy like Tony Ferguson. The inside and outside low kicks constantly. He's got some of the best low kicks in the game. He traded low kicks with Edson Barbosa and caused Barbosa to limp. He's got good leg kicks. He turns over the hip and he just drives it right into your calf. And on the inside of your leg, they're just as powerful. So he'll sometimes frame off your shoulder with the lead hand, throw the inside low kick. He'll get in close to like a clinch range, throw that overhand right, and then frame off with that right hand and whip that right leg kick in. And you've seen Tony have a little bit of trouble with low kicks because he's had a lot of knee injuries. I think Gaethje's going to look to exploit that early. I think he's going to come in. I think he's going to try to close the range really quick and throw like an overhand right to a low kick, or set it up, maybe fake a jab, throw an inside kick, fake a cross, throw an outside low kick. He's got to be careful, though, because one thing Gaethje likes to do, and he doesn't do it as much in his last few fights because of how much Trevor Whitman has kind of refined and reverse engineered him to change up his style a little bit. He used to just come in straight forward, cover up with both hands, and just get in close to you and try to rough you up from the inside. You could do that, but against a guy like Ferguson, who likes to take people to snap down city, pull your head down in that front headlock, and then lock up a Darce choke, that can be a big problem for Gaethje. I think that's one area he really has to look out for, is getting in too close. But he doesn't do that as much in his last few fights. Yes, he still gets in close, but Trevor Whitman has really, refined his striking game and refined his footwork and distance management. He never really hopped in and out of range, in and out, in and out, in and out, and then came in. He kind of just walked forward and ate some shots and then would counter. Against Barbosa, against Vic, and against Cerrone, he kind of just stayed on the outside, kind of faked with that lead hand to try to touch the lead hand of the opponent and get some reads, and then threw some low kicks, and then threw some combos, and then got in close, and then got back out of range. This could be a big factor against Ferguson, because if he's able to stay at range and stay a little calm, get in, catch him, throw a low kick, and get out, that could be a big deal. Because Ferguson has the tendency to keep his chin exposed. And like I said, against a guy like Pettis, he had a lot of trouble with the low kicks. I mean, he still won the fight, but you could tell they were hurting Ferguson early on and causing him to limp. If Pettis can hurt you with low kicks, Gaethje's going to rip your leg off. And I think that's going to be a big problem. And a lot of people are saying, well, this fight's 3 weeks later than it was originally planned to be. That's good for Tony, because Tony has more time to train. I don't believe that. I think that that's better for Gaethje, because Gaethje said prior to the fight that was supposed to take place on the 18th, I have about 18 minutes of pure hell in me. I can go 18 minutes. After that, I get tired. That's into the 4th round. You add another 3 weeks of preparation, I bet he can go 22, 23 minutes hard, and the fight's only going to be 25. So with the ability of him to kind of lay back a little bit more and let the fight come to him and then get into those brawling exchanges, he's going to be able to go a hard 25 minutes, I believe. And I think that's a problem for a guy like Ferguson. Yes, Ferguson's been in a camp. He's been training, but I think he's going to be worn down. And judging on the fact that he decided to cut almost over 20 pounds of weight to prove that he could make weight on the 18th, just to prove a point, champ shit only, CSO, that is going to hurt him going into this fight on May 9th. No doubt about it. You can't cut that much weight, then rehydrate. Then you're going to cut that much weight again 3 weeks later. You're going to come in worn down. You're already worn down from the excessive training camps, and you're going to be even more worn down now when you come in and you cut weight for no reason. So I think Gaethje's going to be the fresher guy. I think Gaethje's going to have enough cardio to go the distance. And an area of this fight, let's look at the wrestling. Both guys are very good wrestlers, but Gaethje is a Division I All-American, I believe. So I don't expect Tony to be able to take him down. But if Tony is going to look for takedown entries, I expect him to go with that Imanari roll that he did against Edson Barboza. I think we might see that right at the beginning of the fight because it's going to throw off the low kicking game of Justin Gaethje. I think he might come out and go to hook under that lead leg and go for a leg lock and get into that Imanari roll and then try to control him on the ground. I expect Ferguson to go for submissions in this fight and less to try to stand and bang with Gaethje. I think Gaethje's going to try to keep it on the feet, rip kicks to the legs, inside and outside, deaden up that lead leg, rip to the body, and try to take out the air of Tony Ferguson. I do expect Ferguson to go to the body of Gaethje as well with that teep kick. I think that the teep and the front snap kick of Ferguson to the body might be a little bit of trouble for Gaethje, and I think he's going to look to exploit that. I think that Ferguson's going to try to push the pace, but I think Gaethje will be right there with him to push back. And the one area that really throws me off for Ferguson is, number one, it was the low kicks. Number two is that he keeps his chin up in the air at all times. And he does get hit a lot. And against Pettis, he got hit with an overhand right and got dropped. He got hit in the middle of a low kick. He threw a kick, pulled back, and as I believe Pettis threw a right kick, pulled it back into a right punch, but Ferguson threw a kick at the same time, was off balance, got caught on the chin. When he got back up, Pettis came in and threw an overhand right, and it caught Ferguson on the chin and it dropped him. Ferguson was obviously able to use his 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu from Eddie Bravo to gain his composure and try to lock up a leg lock, but he still had some trouble with Pettis. And I think that against a guy like Gaethje, if he hurts you, he's going to finish you. And I think if he drops Ferguson, he's going to let him back up, and then he's going to go from there. And I think the fact that Ferguson keeps his chin so far up in the air, or so high up in the air, and I know a lot of people have said this before, and we always come back to bite ourselves, to eat our words. But against Gaethje, I think this is it. This is where we see Ferguson get finished. And obviously with the jiu-jitsu game, I give the advantage to Ferguson. With the wrestling game, I give it a whitewash. But the wrestling of Gaethje will be able to stop the jiu-jitsu game of Ferguson. And on the feet, Ferguson's good, but keeping the chin up in the air, he's going to leave himself open for either that left hook, the long left hook of Gaethje as he tries to circle away from the fence, or he's going to throw that left hook. Ferguson's maybe going to throw like a punch, keep his chin up in the air with a jab, and Gaethje's going to come over the top with that overhand right, drop him, and then get the finish. So I'm going with Justin, the highlight Gaethje, to finish Tony Ferguson. And I'm going to go with a 3rd round TKO. I think it's going to be a phenomenal fight. I think that this fight is one of the best fights you could ever make in the lightweight division. And I think this is going to throw off the plans for Ferguson and Khabib. I don't think we're meant to see that fight at this point. Yes, I do believe we'll see it eventually, but I think that Gaethje's going to put a stop to it, and Gaethje's going to be the guy who ends up fighting Khabib when he comes back. So I think Ferguson gets KO'd by Gaethje based on what I said earlier in breaking down the fight and breaking down the ground game, the clinch game, the different ranges, and the wrestling. I just see Gaethje as a kryptonite for Tony Ferguson. And I know a lot of people are going to, say I'm wrong, but just look at the facts, and I think you'll see why I picked who I picked. And I think that Gaethje versus Khabib is a very interesting fight because of how good Gaethje's wrestling is. I think he can put a stop to some of the wrestling entries of Khabib, and I think that he can beat him up on the feet. And I think it'll be a great fight. And I'm hoping. A part of me wants to see Ferguson pull through just because I really want to see Ferguson and Khabib. But another part of me wants Justin Gaethje to shake up the world. And I think he does it on Saturday, May 9th at UFC 250. All right, guys, that's it. Those are my predictions. I was supposed to break down the top 15 fighters in the UFC lightweight division and the best fights to make for them, next time out. But I think I'm going to save that for the next episode just because I think we've covered enough for today. I think that this card really took up a lot. I think I covered every fight as best as I could. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I always say, if you enjoyed the Touch 'em Up podcast, it's available anywhere audio podcasts are distributed. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Anchor, and many, many more. And it's also transitioning over to YouTube. I will have some more episodes up, hopefully in the next week or two. I'll be putting more episodes out on YouTube. Expect all 3 parts of this UFC 249, UFC 250, predictions and analysis to be up on YouTube. Tag me. Leave me a review, guys. If you go on Apple Podcasts or any of the podcasting apps, please leave a review for the Touch 'em Up podcast. The more reviews I get, the more positive reviews I get, the more eyes that see this podcast and the more ears we get, the more ears we have listening and the bigger fan base we get and the more we can grow in a quickly fashion. So I'm excited for this fight card. I know a lot of people are. I expect you guys to be excited as well. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. This has been episode 88, part 3 of the Touch 'em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out. Have a good night, everybody. All right? Peace.